just get people back at games. And like, we know that this isn't going to speed it up. It doesn't matter what's going to be said. We're living in a nanny state, and it's going to take forever to do it anyway. But I actually, do you know what? That feeds into my next point about how precious people can be. So, I like yourself. I don't know if you watched the Champions League final on Saturday night. I actually have always been a very big soccer fan. I've lapsed on my passion towards Blackburn Rovers. I must say I haven't really paid too much attention since Steve Keane managed to secure relegation a number of years ago. I've definitely wobbled massively, but I've always been a big soccer fan. But Kevin De Bruyne went off during the first half after getting, he suffered a heavy injury. That's fine. But on his way off, he started crying his eyes out. And, you're talking about a Champions League final, and you always hear Pep Guardiola and managers like this saying, we're going to have to suffer for 90 minutes. We're going to have to suffer, get through this. But Kevin De Bruyne, your captain, goes off crying during the first half, actually visibly crying. And I tweeted, crying when your team is in the heat of battle. Oh, come on. Now, this obviously set people off in a fit of vapours. Now, some people were like, fair enough. And other people were like, this is appalling. And, this is just such a horrible take or whatever. First of all, before I go and defend myself and, sort of have people say to me, why are tears being perceived as weakness? What's your thought on that tweet?
Crying when your team is in a heap of battle. Oh, come on. This fair enough. He's crying. The seriousness of it. He's obviously the skipper of the team. Who imagine. I've been on teams. You've been on teams. Your captain always leads by example, and I would say sets a template for everybody else. Emotionally, physically, mentally, with their actions, with their words, they set the template for others. So obviously he's completely distraught leaving the pitch. Subsequently has I think he got a cracked or something, an orbital bone. He's in trouble anyway. He potentially could miss the Euros. And obviously we saw the big black eye, and he had a big ice pack up against it. Crying in the heat of battle, like I would have loved your hot take when Gaza got the second yellow in the 1990 World Cup semi-final. I was gonna miss the final, but I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from because of the example that I think the captain should set. And like, if that was, I don't know, he obviously was distraught, but should it not be going off with a big rallying cry? And I'm not saying a fist pump, but just like, do it for me or whatever. Whereas it was more a negative slant on him going off, and maybe with his reaction, subconsciously other players could thinking, oh Jesus, he's devastated. Oh, that could have an effect on me. It could have an effect on our play. It could sap the life out of some guys. Whereas, funnily enough, him going off, I think, could have been a positive thing if it had been dealt. I think anything can be a positive. Can get a positive spin out of anything if that's the way you perceive it. If you can get a negative spin out of something if that's the way you want to perceive it as well. That was more likely to be perceived negatively by his teammates and even by the fans and even by his manager, just because of the emotion involved and how it could have just sucked the energy out of everybody involved in Man City. That's just my own opinion. I like, people are saying, it's a head injury and why are tears being perceived as weakness? Don't think tears are being perceived as weakness. When you're out in the heat of battle, there is not being smart. There's just no time for that. There's not. There's not. There is just no time for that. It's all about winning the game. It's all about getting the best out of your team. So there was some precious responses to what you put out. You probably put it out as somebody who's been on a field. I remember getting sent. I remember getting sent off in an under-21 final. Not even going to start. It was a ridiculously harsh sending off. It was a manufactured red card. And we were winning. We were playing Rhinus, and we were winning by a couple of points at the time. And I kind of two options: you go in and sit in the dugout and bawl your eyes out and be miserable, or I probably should have been suspended for this. But I put on a bib and patrolled the sideline and just absolutely roared at everyone for about 20 minutes. And we won the match. I was still disappointed, to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie to you. We won, but I didn't feel part of it because I hadn't, finished the game or whatever. But at least I felt I did something for the last 20 minutes that could positively affect other people. Do you know what I mean? Whereas me sitting there, they'd be like, just said someone looked over, I'm going out, I'm going off like this, and I'm miserable, and that has an effect on my teammates. And suddenly it sets off a chain effect where there's just a negativity throughout the team, and like, oh, we're down to 14 men, how are we going to win? And look, he's miserable, we're all miserable. That's just my own opinion. I think you can take something like that and even put a positive spin on it. But I'm an eternal optimist also, I must say.
Yeah, and I think it's the usual old suspects who are looking to virtue signal and just give that do-gooder vibe, just ultimate sensitivity at all times. I'm not saying you can't cry. I've cried after games. Like, there's no problem with crying, but I was very specific when I said in the heat of battle. This is, like, when you're on the field, this is war. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne had been absolutely terrible in the match. Now, I put that down to Pep Guardiola's ridiculous tactics, whereby for the first time, was it like in 60 games, or the first time in 60 games throughout the course of the season, or he'd only done it once in 60 games, where he didn't start with a defensive midfielder, Fernandinho or Rodri. So he left his team absolutely exposed, and De Bruyne didn't get in the game. But obviously, this is just the point. Like, if this happened in a hurling match, my captain got sent off and he was crying on the sideline and gave the other team a boost with it, kind of give his own team a knock, probably freaked out the manager, set a bad tone, all that kind of stuff. I just thought it was so disappointing as a captain, and it probably summed up why Chelsea won and why City didn't, because you had men on one side, hardened men, and then on the other side you had guys who were willing to make it about themselves. Like, it's so selfish to go crying on the way out. Stop making it about yourself. And I know you want to jump back in, but just to finish off, this isn't about anything to do with, men need to be able to cry and all that kind of stuff. Of course they do. There's no problem with that. But stop trying to hijack the point, which is in the heat of battle, don't be crying out in the middle of the field. You're not 4 years of age.
I love a good cry as much as any man. And
no doubt.
The film The Champ, if anyone has ever seen it, probably the saddest ending in the history of any film, and I've bawled regularly to it. But what you're talking about there, Shane, is basic human psychology, and it's positive body language. It's like this: if you're playing in a game and you're absolutely brown bread, you're done, you have no energy left, are you going to be like that? Are you going to fall on the ground, or are you going to try and get up? And you're going to try and make it look like, even to your man, I still have the better of you. And if it's just positive, or it's positive body language, or it's negative body language. Negative body language can spread throughout a team. Positive body language can do the same. That's all. Like, it was a big thing for it to happen, and a big personal thing. Could he have been able to swallow his own emotions potentially for the better of the team? I think maybe if he was looking back on it now, that he might have dealt with it a bit differently.
Yeah, and again, people, get your comments in. Plenty of people had comments to make on Twitter the other night. The usual old suspects making a big old fuss about it.